talking a bit about tonight, and we'll do a little bit of singing, okay? Okay, a little bit of math we're going to do tonight, okay? All around this notion of what are the ways in which we can create a deeper relationship with the natural world around us. And so some of it will be some musical stuff we'll talk about, some of it will be this sort of emerging field of environmental humanities, okay, asking the big enduring questions of what it means to be human, but asking it within the context of our relationship to the natural world. So those are going to be the things here. For those of you that don't know me, my wife Paula and I lived up here in the Adirondacks for 6 or 7 years and worked at Paul Smith's, and we're back in Geneseo now, south of Rochester. But I make my living as a composer. I write music for choirs and orchestras and put community projects together based on artistic stuff and those sorts of things. And so let's go ahead and well, actually before we move past the title slide here, please note that Dave Fadden, the guy in the poster right there, okay, is the painter of this lovely image. So we struggle with this sort of definition of our relationship with the natural world. Joseph Campbell, okay, a scholar of human mythology, okay, of the biggest stories that go all the way back to the ancient Greeks and Romans that end up in our own world. Okay, he's a person who has synthesized this broad cultural arcs that we live in here in the world influenced by Europe. And here's one of his great one-liners about our relationship to the natural world. He says, "We are in fact products of this earth. We are, as it were, its organs. Our eyes are the eyes of the earth. Our knowledge is the earth's knowledge." Okay. That, of course, flies in the face of our other kinds of attitudes of the natural world around us, and certainly as we struggle with kind of changing our mindsets from colonialistic thinking, okay, going all the way back to the arrival of Christopher Columbus. One of the things that is starting to become more apparent to folks is that when we think of colonialism, we often sort of assume what that's about is how humans are related to humans. Okay, and the nasty things that humans have done to other humans as part of that colonialistic regime with slavery and all of that. Okay, but there's a whole other part of it, okay, of this notion that colonialism also taught us a couple of fundamental assumptions about our relationship to the natural world. Okay, it taught us that the natural world is a place that we can use for ourselves. We can use it up and then move on to somewhere else. Okay, fundamentally, okay, for the just briefly getting really into the weeds of all this. Okay, one of the reasons why the North American continent was so important to the rise of European nation states in the late 16, 17, 1800s was that Europe was largely deforested by that time. And if you wanted to be a nation state, if you wanted to go from being a little island with a bunch of people called England, and in order to be a world power, the thing you needed were ships. Ships are made out of wood. They needed wood in order to conquer territory, to build ships, and to defend that territory, right? And so the deforestation of North America began very early on in the arrival of Europeans to our continent. And in the midst of that, we as folks from that intellectual heritage, okay, in some ways, all of us carry that with us in bigger or smaller ways. And what that replaced was a larger notion of a more intimate, a more sophisticated, a more nuanced relationship with the natural world that comes from our indigenous brothers and sisters. One quick example of this, if you haven't read any books by Robin Wall Kimmerer, okay, you should start with Breeding Sweetgrass, okay? And she's an indigenous author and trained biologist, and she just beautifully walks between those two worlds in her writing. And in this one chapter in her book, Breeding Sweetgrass, she talks about how our grammar affects how we see the natural world. Actually, the grammar of our language, of the languages we speak. Her example is that she said in most European languages, right, there are about 60% nouns, about 30% verbs, okay, and the rest are the articles and adjectives and adverbs, right? And so we say, what's the grade school thing that we say? A noun is a person, place, or thing, right? Is a noun, right? So if you look at a tree, is that a person? No. Is it a place? So we're only left with thing because it's a noun in our grammar, right? And so if it's a thing, it's easy to say, oh, if it's a thing, we can cut it down and we can sell it, okay? Or we can make ships out of it, or we can move it out of the way because we want to have a camp here instead, right? It's a thing that we can manipulate, right? Robin makes the point that in her own indigenous language of Potawatomi, the word for tree is a verb. It was something, it is something, and it's becoming something. She says because in most indigenous languages, the percentages of nouns and verbs are switched. It's about 60% verbs and about 30% nouns. So even our very grammar compels us to think of the natural world as this place that is utilitarian for us, as opposed to a very different kind of relationship. Alex? So, what are some of these ways in which we see ourselves in relationship to the natural world? Here's just a couple of them, right? Okay, real practical things that are important to the Adirondack economy are up on the board right now, right? Okay, we see the wilderness as a vacation spot to escape civilization. Yes, that's a big part of our economy here, isn't it? People escaping their office cubicles wherever they are. Okay, bringing their kids up here for a week. Okay, in a trailer that they pull into the Cranberry Lake, state campground, right? Okay, to give their kids and themselves a break from the sort of built environment and the stresses of civilization, right? To come and have a break from that, and so they see the wilderness as an escape from that, right? We often see it as a healing place. Really interesting new things happening these days. Okay, with forest bathing. Okay, a Japanese tradition that's up here. Really interesting stuff with increasing access for people with disabilities, so they can have this experience of being out into the natural world in ways that the rest of us with two or three legs here have the advantage of going out and experiencing that peace, that break from our stress, those kinds of things. Spiritual renewal and inspiration. Yeah, a lot of us see God out there, and we talk about it a lot, and that's wonderful. That's valid because in the Abrahamic religions, okay, in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, okay, the ways in which God talks about spiritual things and the relationships between humans is often embedded in natural metaphors. So it makes sense that we would go out there, okay, and we would see this as a kind of a natural church, as a cathedral out there, okay, with the tall pines and that sort of thing. Of course, a lot of folks see the wilderness as something to be feared and avoided at all costs. Okay, that doesn't happen as much up here, but teaching at Paul Smith's College, kids coming from Brooklyn and Queens, terrified, absolutely terrified that bears were going to come on campus and eat them up. Took them a long time for them to settle in and to realize that that was probably not going to happen, right? The wilderness is a place to be altered, conquered, or commodified for our own convenience. Okay, bending the wilderness to what makes us comfortable, as opposed to us going out into the wilderness and feeling our discomfort. I was with the National Science Foundation on the Ross Ice Shelf in Antarctica in 2016. I was winter camping on the Ross Ice Shelf with a team from the Scripps Oceanographic Institute, and we were collecting some data from some seismometers, and as you'll find out later, I went on and turned that data into music. But for a human to go to Antarctica is not made for humans. I mean, it's really not made for humans. The cliche is that going to Antarctica is the closest thing to visiting another planet without leaving ours. The only way humans can survive with that is what the National Science Foundation was, with layers and layers and layers of training and protection and backup systems, for which I was gratefully a recipient of once during my time there. But Antarctica doesn't care about me. And even the third day that I was there, one of the most celebrated of the Antarctic scientists, a guy named Gordon Hamilton, a guy who knew more about the place than anyone else on the planet. His snowmobile slipped through a hidden crevasse, and he fell down into it and died instantly. It's a dangerous place. Okay, that unless we can find a way for us to survive in that space, right? Okay, and alter that space for us humans to be in, it ain't made for us, right? And certainly anyone who has worked as a ranger here in the Adirondacks sort of encounter people who forget that the Adirondacks is not made for humans, okay, and it's not a convenient thing, okay, and sometimes they need to be rescued by these heroic and courageous rangers that we have here. And another narrative out there, okay, is the wilderness and nature an intrinsic good? Is it just good because it's there? Or do we have to somehow justify its goodness through usefulness, through profit, through resource extraction, through tourism, through what? We encounter all of these things in different ways here. Alex? So with this, if we want to sort of break out of these sort of typical narratives of our relationship with the natural space, one of the answers is that, okay, if we're not going to sort of pigeonhole the nature in any one of those categories I just gave you, but we're going to say, hey, you know what? I'm here. You, the wilderness, are here. So what are we going to do together? How are we going to listen to each other? How do my actions reflect a deeper relationship with that tree? Okay. Well, if you happen to be a composer and you write music and you want to make music out with natural themes, okay, there's this kind of three strategies that a composer would use, and I use this because of course, if I'm going to be fully human with the natural world around me, composing is part of my humanity. So I'm going to bring that to the woods. I'm going to bring that to the water. That increases and deepens my relationship with the natural world because I'm bringing my humanness into the dialogue, right? And so there's three ways that composers make sounds that have to do with natural spaces. Okay, musical pictures. If you took music appreciation in college, they call them tone poems. Okay, first of all, okay, if you're a musician and you want to write music about the natural world, well, you take the natural world that makes noise, that makes sound, and you imitate it, right? So if the front row over here, okay, you're going to do one thing, okay. Second row, you're going to do another thing. I'm going to show you. Okay, I won't tell you. I'll show you, right? Okay, and then all of you will be doing a third thing. Okay? So we take away the words for a minute, okay, and so watch me, okay, and I'll just very informally conduct this here, okay. So. You can imitate the sound of a rainstorm, right? Okay. And of course, this is a classic subject for composers. If we go back to the sort of groundbreaking animated film Bambi when it first came out. Okay, there's a rainstorm scene in the early part of that. Okay, where it goes deep, 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 right, an orchestral version of what we just did. So those are imitative sounds. Okay, you can only imitate natural sounds though if the thing you're doing makes sound. So like if you want to do a piece of music about the sun, doesn't make much sound, right? right? Okay, so there's nothing to imitate there. So you have to have some other strategies here, okay? So another sort of strategy that composers draw from are cultural sounds, okay? So if we have certain cultural artifacts that represent the sun. Okay, let's say we're going back and looking at ancient Aztec stuff, right? Okay, what do we know about ancient Aztec music that would have been part of ceremonies? Okay, around the recognition of the sun, various kinds of things, and then finally, okay, if you don't have either of those things, okay, then you go with abstract sounds. Okay, these are the things that we really associate with film scores. Okay, so it's the sort of thing where you folks don't even need to see the picture. If I sing the music, you know what's up on the screen. Okay, so what's on the screen if you hear these only two notes on the lowest string of a cello? Jaws. A big nasty shark about to eat you up. Now, let me ask you, does a a shark sound like a cello? No? So we're not really imitating the shark, right? Does the shark like play cello in like the Coral Reef Community Orchestra? Maybe? I don't know. Okay. So how did a guy named John Williams, the most successful of our sort of modern era of film composers, come up with those two notes? Okay. It wasn't random. Because you know that he repeats the notes, right? Okay, it's da-dum, 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 dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum. Right? Right? Well, listen to what happens when you take the pitches out of it and you just listen to the rhythm that he wrote. Dum, 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 dum. What is that? It's a heartbeat when you are feeling hot. Now, had John Williams took the bass drum player in the back of the orchestra and he went dum dum, dum dum, all of us would have been like, come on, John, you're getting paid more, okay, for a better idea than that, right? Right? But what he did was that he took that physiological rhythm, okay, because what happens to us in a concert hall is that our heart rates want to align with the music that we are listening to. Okay, it's a physiological thing. We cannot control it. Okay, the reason why athletes put on headphones, okay, and listen to, right? They want to get their heart rate up. Okay, because that's what physiologically we do. We respond to that tempo of music, right? And so John Williams takes that physiological phenomenon. He knows he's messing with us, and we can't stop him, right? And what he does is that he adds this dissonant interval of a minor second. Da-dum, da-dum. You hear da-dum, 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 da-dum. It's pretty annoying. Okay, it isn't da-da-da-dee-da-da-da. No, da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. It's kind of irritating, right? And so now what happens is that whenever we hear da-dum, we associate that raising of the heart rate not only with just anything of being scared, but a very specific thing, because it was attached to that picture. Right? That's an abstract version, or one of the most effective two notes of abstract sounds for composers. Of course, the John Williams portfolio is really long. Okay, who's on the screen now? Bum 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 ba dum bum ba dum bum bum ba yum ba dee dum ba dum. Who's that? Yeah, it is Star Wars, but what character? Darth Vader. Yeah. And even when you go back and you listen to the soundtrack of the prequel, when they have the cute little precocious Anakin Skywalker, cute little kid, right, who eventually turns into the really nasty evil guy with the bad breath, right? What does John Williams play in the background when little Anakin is bouncing along is playful version of that same melody, right? So composers use these things, okay, to tell stories, okay, and also to get into our nature, okay, into our physiology as humans, and also into the natural world. So, a couple other things, okay, to get really into the weeds on all of this, okay. Our friend Pythagoras, okay, that your sons and daughters and grandchildren, okay, have to slog through on their 10th grade geometry New York State Regents about, okay. Pythagoras actually did a whole bunch of other stuff other than the Pythagorean theorem. He actually ran this kind of spa. Okay, this sort of philosophical spa in southern Italy, okay, where people came to take care of their bodies and to learn music and to learn mathematics and to interact with the natural world. It was sort of half monastery, half spa. Okay, and one of the really interesting things that came out of his philosophy was this. Okay, if all you have are numbers, he said you have arithmetic, just numbers. if you put numbers into space, Pythagoras says, now you have geometry. Here's where it gets fun. Pythagoras says, if you have numbers in time, that's music. And then if you have numbers in space and time, you have astronomy. You have the dancing of the heavenly spheres, okay, in this beautiful sort of musical motion in the sky, right? That the ancient Greeks looked at. So he says everything is number, all is number. Okay, we're used to this, right? Go to the doctor. The doctor puts the blood pressure cuff in your arm. Okay. You do it. He writes down the number, right? He just transformed part of me into a number, defined me as a number. Because transferring that into a number helps he or she learn what my body is doing. Okay, it's a numerical expression of my body, right? So we do this all the time. Okay, we're actually quite comfortable with making everything in numbers. Later on, okay, a couple of other generations of Greek philosophers later, Aristotle had this really cool idea. Okay, he said that everything has an essence and an accidents. Everything has a fundamental, unchanging quality to it. But then all those same things have a changing expression of that, the accidents. Okay, so right now, okay, I am 60-year-old Glenn, healing up from knee surgery, right? Okay, I've got all this white stuff here, right? And this is the outward expression of Glenness as a 60-year-old. However, okay, my older brothers and sisters say that when I was 10, and that was a very different expression of that, there was still an essence of Glenness when I was 10 that I still have today. There's something that endures even though the expression of that changes. Right? And so in the, again, going back to Pythagoras, all of these three things right here are expression of right triangleness, the essence of what it means to be a right triangle. One's a picture, one is a couple words, the other is a mathematical equation. Blood pressure cuff expresses part of me, right? Okay, it's not all of me though, right? I do other things, right? Other than have blood pressure, right? But it's a way of understanding that everything that we have can be seen in both its sort of essence, its unchanging thing, and also the thing that does evolve and change over time. So this all brings us to this notion of sonification. Okay, if we can turn my blood pressure into numbers. Okay, so a doctor can help understand me better, right? Okay, well, gosh, what happens if we start to use numbers in the process of making music? Numbers that come from scientific research. All of us, by the time we were in 3rd grade, we learned how to take a list of numbers that the teacher gave us and make a picture. Called a graph, right? Line graph or a bar graph. Because you look at the picture and you can understand those numbers in a new way, right? A different way than just if you're just trying to read the individual numbers. It's a tedious thing unless you're a real numbers person, right? Gotta have a picture, right? Okay. Well, sonification is just simply the audio version of that. We take a list of numbers and we make a musical picture out of it. Okay? And why do we do this? Okay, it's a way of engaging a new sense of us in understanding science. Okay, so it's not just our eyes anymore, and now it's our ears. Oh geez, if there's a tempo, now it's our hearts. Oh dear. Now we're investing more of our physiology in this science thing that's in front of us, right? Not just thinking of it as a dry little thing, right? We find musical stories in data. The accountant that I had in my business, okay, for 20 years before he passed away, when we would show up to do our taxes, okay, that we'd hand him the profit and loss sheet and looking haggard because my wife and I had just sort of spent a whole lot of time trying to get all these numbers together, and it wasn't easy, it wasn't fun, right? And Ed would look back at us and say, Glenn, I know you look at these numbers and you just see a lot of stress. When I look at these numbers, I see a story. I see a story of what their business did this year. Same thing is true for scientific data. We see stories in the natural world in these numbers, and music is a way to help tell that story. And also, data analysis tool for visually impaired, that for folks that cannot, okay, read reams and reams and reams of visual numbers on a screen that comes from some scientific study. Okay, there's Braille versions of some of that stuff, but that's slow, right? Okay, how is it those folks with a visual impairment can get into this data more quickly? Well, if you sonify it, they're going to hear the numbers go up when the pitch goes up. They're going to hear the numbers go down when the pitch goes down. All sorts of other ways, okay, in which to engage these other senses. So, a quick example of this. Okay, I worked with the European Space Agency a few years back. Okay, you may recall something called the Rosetta mission. Okay, it was the first time the humans sent an orbiter out into space for 9 years, traveling through the loneliness of space, and to encounter a comet while it was going by, and to drop a lander on the comet. Astonishing technical achievement. It's unbelievable that we as human beings could pull this thing off, right? So I was working with the flight dynamics team of this. These were the mathematicians that were driving the orbiter, right? And we took some data, the positioning data from the day that the orbiter met the comet. So after 9 years of flying, there's this great dramatic moment of this encounter, and I used the process of sonification to create some music out of it. For all of you math fans out there, okay, this is essentially a version of modular mathematics. Okay, where you take the numbers that you're given, you find the range, okay, which is the difference between the highest and the lowest number. Okay, you divide that range up into, I'm going to say 7 equal pieces, 7 equal intervals, 7 equal modules, because do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and do is just another version of do. So if I divide it up into 7 chunks, 7 equal chunks, then what I can do is that I can go back, take one of those data points from the flight dynamics people, and I'm going to see which of these things, which of the intervals that number falls into. Because that interval is now going to be associated with a do, a re, a mi, a fa, a sol, a la, or a ti. And that gives me a melody to work with. Of course, the flight dynamics data, as you saw, had parallel data sets, which means you not only read the data horizontally, but you also read it vertically. That's what musicians do. When we read data horizontally, it's a melody. When we read the data vertically, when all the instruments are playing together, that's harmony. And so I took 4 of those parallel data sets. I ran it through the math, okay, and I assigned each of those data sets to soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. And in this case, they added a string quartet too. So first, second, violin, viola, and cello. By the way, just so you know, the European Space Agency has its own choir. It has its own string quartet. made up of engineers and secretaries and astronauts and cooks and all of these amazing people. We have a good choir. So what I want to do is I'm going to play for you this piece, okay, with some visuals that were added to it. And this piece is called Rosetta, okay, that was the name of the mission, right? And it's called Variations on a Day in Space. Okay, so there are 3 variations. Each of those variations follows the sonified data, okay? The first chunk of it that I'll point out is the raw sonified data. I didn't change a thing. The numbers gave me what it gave me, and this is what it sounds like. Out of my control, hard math, right? And then the 2 variations after that was doing what composers do. You take the source material and you mess with it, right? Okay. So what I'm gonna ask you, okay, is as you listen to this, okay, at the end of it, I'm gonna ask your impressions, okay, of the data that came from this moment in space and time after 9 years of flying in orbiter. Okay, what does listening to the data do? How is that different than just looking at the list of numbers? So. listen to numbers.
Space.
Going back to what you said earlier, as far as, to me, it sounds more like a verb than a noun. Something, it seems like an expansion of the purpose for it.
There's movement happening. We start here and then we move on. We do something else, and we're part of that movement. We're part of that drama. Part of the story. What's the emotion that this elicits in you? And this is not a quiz. You can say whatever you want. Okay. People see different things in my music all the time. So that's what's the feeling?
Grandeur.
What's that?
Grandeur.
Grandeur, right. Yeah, those pictures of the comet, those are pictures of the comet. Those are not animations. Those are pictures that the orbiter sent back. Yeah. Huge grandeur. What else?
Peace.
Peace. Interesting. Yeah.
Sort of spiritual, in the music and the enormity of what's actually happening there is quite shocking and sort of spiritual and of our realm, but of another realm also.
Yeah, good. Something bigger than us.
Yes.
Right. A mystery that we're willing to be part of.
We're seemingly so.
Yeah, my dear friend, Helen DeMoney, when she heard this verse, she said, it's a piece about longing. Longing for 10 years in open space to finally find the thing you're looking for. But yeah, just so you know, the orbiter itself is about the size of this room. Okay, and the lander, okay, this right here, it's about the size of a washing machine. Just to get a sense of things. So.
How big a planet was it?
About probably 7 feet in diameter, probably. Yeah, with 3 legs, extending out to planet. It was actually a pretty bumpy landing. Okay. What time do we have now, Alex?
It is 6:48.
With that?
6:48.
Okay. Another version of this. Okay, closer to home. Okay, Wolf Lake. Our colleague Kurt Stager taking marvelous Paul Smith's students out and doing lake core samples and going back into the ancient history of natural history of the Adirondacks. We took some of his data, okay, and sonified it and used it for one of the pieces in this sort of this opera project that's in development here that many of you know about called the Promised Land, the Adirondack Folk Opera Project. And but the data set here that Kurt sent to me, of course, doesn't fit nicely in a PowerPoint slide. Okay, so what his data is, okay, you can see, okay, this right here is the measurement on the core sample. Okay, so Kurt's students drive this empty cylinder down into the bottom of a lake, and then they pull up all the mud that's in that, right? And then they open up the cylinder, okay? And so here, okay, this is the measurement from the end of the cylinder as it goes back, right? And what Kurt can say is that, okay, every one of these increments, okay, of 0.25 correlates with a year. Okay, so whatever that slice of the core was is associated with this number here. Okay, and if you just sort of forgive me here for some scrolling, yes. His data goes all the way back to the Roman Empire. What was Wolf Lake doing? Okay, when the Romans were doing their thing, right? Okay, and essentially, what the other part of this this data set is this third column. Okay, and again, forgive me the scrolling here. Okay, is the a percentage of planktonic material, okay, which is associated with wetter or drier climates. Okay, so Kurt and the students are able to sort of chart, okay, how wet or dry, okay, each of these years were by what Wolf Lake gives us. Okay, so here are these other two columns are the sonified musical notes. Okay, I gave you an example earlier of a mod 7 translation. Okay, the do re mi scale, right? Okay, the 7 notes of the do re mi scale. Okay, so this one over here, okay, is the mod 7 translation. But of course, there's other scales on the piano, right? There's that chromatic scale, all the black and the white notes next to each other. And that has 11 notes in it. Okay, so this actually is the mod 11 translation of the same data. Okay, so you get different kinds of things out of it. And so what we did was one of the songs from the Adirondack Folk Opera Project, here sung by the marvelous baritone soloist Jarrell Williams. The text is from Ralph Waldo Emerson's poem called "The Adirondack." It's an excerpt from that poem, and the first part of this is an original melody that I wrote, but in that kind of 19th century style. And then when you hear the piano come in, that's when the sonified data comes in, and suddenly, okay, the Adirondack landscape becomes part of the landscape of the music itself. So here we go. Oh, jeez.
All day we swept the lake. All day we searched in every cove. North from Camp Maple, south to Osprey Bay, beholding the procession of the pines. Watching when the dawn should drive the deep, whipping its rough surface for a draught.
what do we hear? The piano was very, well, the vocal was not following the piano, it was riding above it. Yeah.
And sort of part of that texture, okay? Jarrell was no longer soloist there, okay? He becomes part of that ecosystem. Other thoughts here? Well, the special occasion for tonight, okay, is playing some music that's been part of a 2-year project that I've been working with the Lake Champlain Basin project. They have an artist in residence program, and what we were able to start 2 years ago was getting some data from some of the Basin program scientists there from the lake, okay, and to begin to sonify that. I wrote a bunch of music for it, okay, and I had 3 other composers. I had one composer from Quebec, okay, who wrote a piece for choir and piano. Had a composer from the Akwesasne Mohawk Nation write this beautiful indigenous melody around the data, and then another fellow who was born in Ghana, okay, but he lives here in the States now, and he took that same data and wrote this rocking, upbeat West African high life dance tune with it, right? And so all of these artists were coming at the same data set with different cultural backgrounds and assumptions and goals, but we're all kind of exploring this same data. That data came from these buoys, which they had planted in an area that was you may remember a couple years back, it had some major flooding in the lake, okay, and these buoys that are tethered to the bottom of the lake, they actually went completely underwater, okay, as the water rose over it, but they were still able to send the regular data spurts out electronically, even though they were underwater. And of course, what we did in the very first meeting, okay, up in one of the islands in the northern part of the lake, was we took that data set, okay, that came from one of their scientists, and the people in the room, okay, folks not unlike you folks, okay, we gave them paper and pencils. And they each did the math, and they ran the mod 7 translation, okay, of the data that came through. This is sort of part of a little bit of that moment, okay, when we started to gather the notes, okay, and to see what it was, what was these water levels telling us. So just a little excerpt of this. In the moment where we heard the music first come out of the list of numbers, when it first emerged.
Read the data and large number of numbers in the data set. Do you find multiples of 7 work better, or do you find that 7 works better?
It can work in lots of different ways, and actually the choice of the particular way that you want to use the math is one of the creative choices, okay? And as I find working with my scientific colleagues, they do stuff with data all the time, okay? Resorting it, re-looking at it all the time, and so this is one of these instances where scientists and musicians are actually thinking very much alike, okay? Okay, so we're back to murder now, right? Okay, so here's what we're going to do for those of you, okay, who have been writing down all these numbers here. Okay, we have our translation code, our code here, right? Okay, we pick a number, that's going to make a note. That's going to make a musical note for us. Okay, so let's just start at the top of the data set, right here. Okay, 23.6. Okay, actually I'm gonna keep track of things here as well. Another pencil over there? Okay, so 23.6, what is our first note? La. And 23.5. Also a la? Two la's. 23.58. Whole lot of laws here.
Once every 15 minutes, it doesn't change that quickly.
Yeah. Okay. So let's actually set down to number 8 here. 24.03. What would that be? T. And we get several T's here, right? Okay, if we scan those notes, we see a lot of 24s, right? Okay, so one of the things that we're learning about the data is that it kind of looks like it sticks in one area for a while before it shifts, right? As opposed to it being volatile every single data point going up and down. Okay, we're already starting to kind of get a sense for this thing. We're going to get a whole bunch of laws. We're going to get a whole bunch of T's. A whole bunch of T's. Look at all those 24s there, right?
And you had to be greater than all
And so, I can scale that up a little bit here. Yes, 23 boost. 22s. So, 21s. Well, 20. Into notes, okay, that then can turn into a melody of some kind here, right? So let's just hear what this data is giving us so far. Here is this in the PUC. Okay, the first part of the data set here starts here. So those are the numbers that came out of the homework in the room. Okay, and that is the melody that all of our composers have been working with. I wanted to air out a new piece sort of based on that. Okay, this one is a musical setting here by this 1866 poet, Henry Theodore Tuckerman. This is just an excerpt from the poem. It's actually quite a long poem. Okay. So the melody we just heard come out of the calculation, right? Was da 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 da. That was the first part. Second part was da 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 dee da 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 da. Whole bunch of stuff you can do with that. Whole bunch of stuff that a composer can do with that little chunk of melody. So let's just see what we got. Okay. In the vast realm where tender memories brew, or sacred haunts, haunts of time, that woo his spirit in nobler mood. And the more beneath climb, so in the vein of thy majestic hills, we meekly stand delayed. The baffled heart of tranquil rapture fills beside the crystal gate. O'er there here in sense of closer pines, round mossy islands, we play. Here tufted headlands meet the loosened tide. There gleams spacious when locust bloom and wild rose scents the air, when moonbeams fleck the streams, and June's long twilight in crimson shadows wear, here we linger, here we gaze, here What's interesting about it?
That you made that from the sound of a buoy in the water.
It's kind of a thing, isn't it, right? It's sort of a thing, right? Yeah. One of the things that Mary Kate, or that May Kate Campbell, the lead scientist on this project, said is that when we started, when we played that melody, da 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 dee da 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 dum, da 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 dee da 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 dum. Yeah, her eyes lit up, and she says, "Oh, she said it feels to me like that loneliness of the buoy when it was all out on its own, and the water went up over its head and it was all by itself. She was sort of personifying the buoy in this marvelous drama, you know, but it's a way of taking what we do as human beings. Okay, this is one of the things that I do. Okay, and it's a way of digging into the natural world, not just simply by taking a hike or a paddle, okay, and making some music that are my impressions of it, which is a perfectly wonderful and valid and marvelous way to make music out of nature. I do that all the time. But this other step of embedding the science in it. So it's not just my impressions of the lake. It is the lake talking to me, right? It's the lake talking to me in the numbers that came from that buoy, okay? Okay, just like my body talks to the doctor through the numbers of my blood pressure, right? The doctor learns something more about me through those numbers that he can't see just by looking at it. The same thing is true with finding these new ways to enhance and to deepen and to create more nuance in our relationship with the natural world. And so, just to finish up what I'm saying here, and then we can just talk. Oh yeah, that's what it looks like in the picture. You can see right here. See that drop off right there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess what I'm suggesting here, just through my own experience of bringing a little chunk of what it means for me to be a human being into the natural world, is this encouragement, okay, for us to consider ourselves to be fully human when we're in wilderness spaces. To not just take the hike for the exercise, but that's a good idea, right? Okay, but when you're out there, use every sense that you have. Okay, listen for sounds. Actually stop hiking for a little while and just be quiet and listen to see what is happening out there. When you hear something, just try to imitate it. With the sound from your mouth or your hands. See if you can call back to that bird. You can call back to that wind or that wave that's sloshing on the stone. Or if you are a visual artist, make sure you have something to scribble on and to scribble with. If you're a cook, go out there, search for all of those aromas, all of those beautiful smells that come out of the forest. Focus on them. Take a little time. Spend a little time with each one, just as you would if you were making a complicated recipe and you had to get the aroma to make sure that it had cooked properly. Right? Okay. All of these things that we can take our sorrows, we can take our victories, our joy out into these spaces, and share it with that space in whatever way makes sense for you, in words perhaps. Okay. In all sorts of ways, because the more that we are fully human out in these natural spaces, the better our relationship with that natural space becomes. Because we start to listen better, okay, if we are willing to give a bit. in my classes, in my college classes, okay, the most feared question, okay, that my students said that they feared the most, okay, when I would ask, okay, after we had just done something, okay, is that I would ask, so what do you think? Because of course there was no right or wrong answer, and there's a risk in sort of stepping out and saying something, right? Okay, and it's not the sort of, oh, I have to say the right thing to impress my teacher or not be embarrassed by my peers. No. When I ask that question to them, just as I ask it to you now, I want to know what you think. What do you think?
I think it's a fascinating approach, to take something like numbers and move it into music. And so you've got like a triangle with the natural world and the numbers and the music that you're intertwining.
Seems like everything's based on numbers. Everything.
I'm glad you agree with Pythagoras. Okay, so.
Break it down and it's all about the numbers.
One of the interesting stuff that comes out of some early Greek philosophy on all of this, okay, was the notion that the measurement of certain pitches when you sing them together, okay, some of them sound good, some of them don't. Right. Okay. And then so Pythagoras would measure the length of the string for each of these things, and he uses their relationship between the length of this note and this note that makes it sound good together, right? Right. Versus this note and this note that sounds really dissonant and nasty, right? And of course, you know, that happens now. You know, if I pluck this string right here, just hum this note with me. If I put my finger at exactly halfway of the distance of the string, okay, so the ratio would be 1 to 2. It is this note. That's an octave, right? Okay, okay. All of you sing that low note, ready? Keep going, keep going. I'm going to sing the high one with it. That octave sounds pretty good together, right? Yeah. So the ratio of 1 to 2 tends to sound good, right? Okay, and then Pythagoras would say, well, gee, what happens if we have blocks of wood? Right, okay, and we put them on a 1 to 2 ratio, right? We put 2 on the bottom and 1 on top. Well, geez, that ratio that sounds good in music is also really stable as a building practice, especially at a time when you didn't have concrete in order to put the stones together, right? Okay, you had to rely on gravity, right? And so you know, to build on what you're saying, there was all this transfer to other things of finding out that certain kinds of mathematical relationships in one field of knowledge, okay, could easily be transferred into another one and have similar effects. Yeah. Other thoughts? Other thoughts, impressions here?
It's eye-opening. I had no idea you could do that. How did you personally start thinking about theta this way?
A couple things. One thing that I did not do in my introduction, which I probably should have, okay, is that I know it does not sound at all like it in time with you this evening, but I am a severe stutterer, and so what you've been hearing is not my natural speech. You've been hearing my artificial controlled speech. I'm really good at it. Okay, but it's not a cure. Okay, so you know, as I have been talking to you, about half of my brain has been thinking about what I've been saying, and the other half of my brain has consciously been controlling every muscle that makes every sound and every word as it flies by. Okay, so It's pretty intense to hold the control to this level. Okay, this is the highest level of the control. Speech pathologists say that when we who use this particular control technique hold it to this this level, our speech is better than everyone else, which is described as normally disfluent. Because everyone stutters a little bit, right? You know, when you're tired, okay, when you're nervous, okay, you know, words don't come out the way you want them to sometimes. Everybody does it, right? Some of us are just blessed with more of it than others. So if I was actually to turn off the control, okay, and not use it at all, it doesn't take very long to do that about every 3 or 4 words, right? So as a kid, before I learned this control, when I sang, it diffused the disability because music circumnavigates that part of the brain, which meant that the only time as a little kid where I could feel powerful, I could feel beautiful, I could feel in charge, I could share what was on the inside of me was when I sang, right? And so music was not just a fun thing to do on the side, it had an empirical, measurable effect on my disability. And so from the start, okay, the meeting point between science and music was really evident to me as a kid. It's like, oh geez, this is a thing, right? And later on, what would happen is that I'd end up being at a high school, you know, writing some music for this great group, and one 10th grade boy named Isaac asked some really interesting questions, like more interesting than most 10th grade boys ask in a music class. And I asked the teacher, I said, "Who's Isaac?" And he said, "Well, Isaac has an interesting mom. She writes these personal histories of famous scientists." Okay, I said, "Well, would I know any of her books?" And she says, "Well, the one that's out right now, this is in 1999, he said it's been a bestseller. It's called Galileo's Daughter, right?" And in the airport flying down, right, before getting on the plane, I had bought that book in the airport bookstore, and I reached into my briefcase. It's like, this is his mom, right? And the guy says, "Oh yeah, that's David, right?" And so David and I struck up a friendship that led to 6 or 7 years of work in children's operas and doing all this stuff. And since her work was so science focused, that was the thing that really turned the corner into, from a creative standpoint, from a composer standpoint, of saying, okay, yeah, we're going to take Galileo's data and we're going to run that, okay, and come up with some choir pieces and songs and orchestra pieces and stuff like that. So yeah. Other thoughts, other questions here? We've been at it for a while here, so you've been very patient with me. Thank you.
How do you pick which data sets or do people call them new data sets?
The best part about my job is that I always work with interesting people. I don't tend to hang out with folks that kind of phone it in, you know. The folks that are passionate about what they're doing. They're in some cases, like my colleagues in Antarctica, actually putting themselves at risk in order to gather this data, you know. And so what happens is that the data tends to arise from the people I find myself working with. So when I was at Paul Smith's, you know, didn't take long, okay, to find out who Kurt Steger was, okay, and got some data from him, and we've done several projects together. Wonderful way of building new friendships with interesting people, you know, around the world, and such. So. Well, just a couple thank yous before we finish up. All of this stuff, all of this Lake Champlain stuff, okay, came from funding, okay, from the Lake Champlain Basin program, okay? And our local partner here who helped facilitate and kind of manage the project was the Adirondack Diversity Initiative. Okay, they've been so great in helping the ongoing logistics over this 2-year project. And I'm absolutely convinced that the stuff that's coming out of this first project is going to continue and grow with some other funding sources elsewhere. We'll cross our fingers for that. Also big thanks to Alex and to Amy for hosting tonight. Yeah. Whatever the next thing is, come and bring one more person with you. Okay. So Alex has to go in the closet and get some more chairs. That's your goal for the next time here. But yeah, thank you so much for listening tonight.